Hello, everybody. It is Tara Boothby, and I'm here with William Paul Young, who is the New York Times bestselling author of The Shack. And what's cool is we're going to talk about my book, Love and Love's Energy, and Paul's a significant part of my journey with this book. So he has ebbs and flows in ways that he's been a teacher for me, and he's spoken to me and breathed life into me as I've been working on this project. So thank you, Paul, for being here.
I am honored and thrilled to be here.
Oh,
Anytime I can hang around you, it's a benefit to me. So
oh, thank you so much, Paul. I think what's so special about you is that you're just life-giving to the people around you. And I don't know, that's something I deeply admire. And I don't know if you've unpacked that for yourself, but what do
no.
you think it is that you've done? Because your humanity and your genuine love leads. You've got celebrity, but when you talk to people, you're just Paul.
Yeah. Celebrity is unrighteous wealth, right? So is notoriety or platform or even money. It's unrighteous wealth. And there's a Luke parable. Don't remember what chapter it is, but it's about, and it's misunderstood a lot, but it's about a rich man who has a manager, and the manager, he's told the manager is not being right with his riches. So he brings a manager and he says, you're going to get fired. Just so you know, you're going to get fired. So the manager is like, I'm going to lose my job. So what he does is he goes to all the debtors, the rich man's debtors, and because he's the manager, and he goes and meets them and he says, so how much do you owe? 800 bushels of grain. He said, well, here's what you need to do. Cut it in half, right? Just cut it in half and pay it. And he did that to a guy who owned a whole bunch of wine and all of this stuff. He went to him because he's thinking, I'm going to lose my job. And these folks that I have done this really good thing for are going to take me in, at least because I don't want to beg and I don't know how to get another job. And and the comment in Luke is that he's very shrewd. He's a shrewd manager. And his boss, the rich man, recognizes how shrewd he is. So he's put up some money and he's made these friends by and then it goes on to say, the people in the world are much more shrewd with unrighteous wealth than the people of the kingdom, the sons of the light, right? So the bottom line of that is, yes, wealth is unrighteous. Notoriety is unrighteous. Platform is unrighteous. So are you going to be like the shrewd manager who uses that unrighteous wealth selfishly on himself, only on himself? Or in the kingdom, you use unrighteous wealth for the sake of others. You store up treasures in heaven. And so it's this great thing. And I love that parable because it says, all right, so I got this notoriety. How can I use this unrighteous wealth for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of others, and not selfishly? How can I be shrewd about where I've ended up today? And so that's part of a perspective. I don't have an identity in unrighteous wealth like the rich young ruler did, he couldn't untie himself from the unrighteous wealth
Yeah,
and attach himself to all the riches of heaven who is in the person of Jesus, right?
yeah.
And so that's very helpful to me. You mentioned, do I think about how my life is now? No. People bring it up like you just did, and it's such a sweet thing. And it's such um, a memorial of the journey that I've been on, right? And I'm so full of gratitude
Yeah.
that this is the way that I am now compared to the way I was. because I certainly wasn't like this.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my journey has been undoing all the impediments, not all of them. I still screw up. But undoing a lot of the impediments that allowed me to be free, so that love was the ways that I am, because it's the truth of who I am.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. And I find that too, like discovering, you know, that love is nonviolent, and allowing myself to believe in a nonviolent God who just
Correct.
loves has been one of the most, well, I mean, the most
Transformative.
transformative thing of changing everything. And I can look back on my own errors of being violent or
Yeah,
harsh. And I'm like, if I would have known that love steers everything, man, I could have just been so different in those moments. And then still,
sure.
when those moments show up, I don't know. I'm good. My friend Tim Bishop Wilbur told me this story. He's in the airport and he has a breathing machine and it started to fall off his cart and he's fumbling around, and then somebody reaches over and packs it up for him, and he said he turned around, he's like, and it was Paul. Right, it was you.
Uh-huh.
And I think that that's such a breath of fresh air of exactly what you're talking about, is we can be an ego of the riches we have stored in this life, or we can participate.
Yeah. Or we can use an ego to do things to get attention.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just as unrighteous as anything else. Right.
Yeah.
So people ask me about my spiritual practices, and it makes me laugh because I'm not self-disciplined, and spiritual practices, frankly, are really too complex for me. Now, saying that, I love to participate in them when others participate in them. If they like to, I'm in, so I'll walk the maze or whatever. But, and they're saying, so then how do you live? And I thought about that and I went, I just assume. I just assume that I'm loved, and I just assume that I can have a conversation, and I just assume all this. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to get to all this.
Right.
So when I'm in the airport, I wasn't trying to do something cool or something, you know, compassionate. I just did the next right thing based on the truth that I understand about myself and about God.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what you're saying. If we have a violent God, we have an excuse to be violent ourselves.
Yes.
You know?
100%. And
Yeah.
that's my personal experiences. I wouldn't say I'm violent. I'm not a soldier. I haven't done these sorts of real aggressive, violent things. But believing that there is a place where harsh judgment and this critical, wrathful, firebolty God, for me, I participated in error
Yeah.
to be judgmental and critical and firebolty with people around me. And I was wrong. And it's
Yeah.
such a healing piece in my own life to know that God leads with love first.
Well, doesn't even lead with love, is love.
Is love.
It is never something God does. It is
Mm-hmm.
the way God is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add another component, and that is you believe that you have a sin nature, that your basic nature is wrong. So you've got a God who is violent in one sense or another, and then you by nature are violent in one sense or another. And so you've got to have the law, Christian law, whatever law, come in and dominate your sin nature and total depravity and all that kind of crap. And so you're in a violent war to begin with,
Yeah.
and you cannot win that war. Right. And that's the world that I grew up in. And I can tell you, it does not produce a life of love. It cannot,
No.
And so you look at something like notoriety, and in a world of notoriety, everything's violent. When you have a world of notoriety, it is a violent world,
Yeah.
because now we're competing with each other. We're in conflict with each other. And you get a verse like let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only that which is good for the moment to build up. And it's a command. So is it a command that is pressed over a sin nature? No, it is there because it's a recognition that if you understand who you are, made in the image and likeness of God, which is love, then you will not speak unwholesome words. Why would you? And so it's like almost a promise. I tend to look at commands like that as promises.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and just to catch up with that, you said, because when we take that word love and, you know, you are created in the likeness of love, is just this beautiful reminder when we put that emphasis on the right thing, that we are created in the likeness of love and we are inheritance of love and all these beautiful things, where when we focus on all caps moral living or the rules that govern us, it moves us out. I'm doing the right thing, this man's bag is falling, the right thing is to pick it up, or I'm just in the likeness of love.
Yeah, and it's more than just the likeness. It's in union with love.
Yeah.
There's no separation, because our tendency is to make a separation, therefore to establish moralism as proof, right? And it's
Right.
not that. It is that we are in union with love. We're not only made in the image and likeness of God, but in order to even exist, we have a union in which there is no separation.
Right.
So it is the most natural thing for us to be patient.
Yes.
Right? There are no prayers for patience anywhere in the New Testament. There's no prayers for kindness, goodness, help me love more. Nobody prays those. The prayers are, may your inside eyes be opened up so that you would know the height, the width, the width, the breadth, the depth of love that you by birth, because you can't birth yourself. That's John 3. You can't birth yourself, not physically and not spiritually. So this is the covenantal God who is wedded to us and in union with us, so that patience is our nature. Now, as long as we think that we're still that crappy person, then we'll either pray for patience or that we'll just go like, hey, I'm just an impatient person. No, you're not. So here's the problem, because we would love to just think we're an impatient person, because it's like, what do you expect? I'm just an impatient person. When you begin to realize that you are made in the image and likeness of God, and by union, you are wedded to love, and that now is your nature. Now you have to make some choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything that is in conflict with that, you have to deal with.
Right.
And now, but you can. See, you can. And you can begin to recognize, I am kind by nature. I am pure of heart. I am self-controlled, not self-disciplined. I am those are all inside out expressions.
Yeah.
And that realization, that revelation is what broke my addictions.
Mm.
Right? My addictions, I tried self-discipline. It does not work. And you're at war with yourself. And so,
Yeah.
it was the revelation that I had self-control and I was pure of heart.
Yeah. And it's that I can use my impatience. I can use my judgment. I love judging. I'm good at judging.
Welcome to the
But
human race.
yeah, but what actually is loving, knowing that my design is love and loving that part of me, has been more instrumental in softening that capital J judge and allowing me to lead more with love, everything you're saying. But one of the words or the language that I've heard you use when you're talking about God's love, or how you trust God's love, is the slow burn of the slow burn, the slow learning curve of letting love us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering for you, like that slow, like
It's not always slow. If you do something massive and it burns the world and you get burned in that, right? So you can light yourself on fire. And but the work of God, because God is so caring and God will do no harm. God will do no harm. But God has promised to destroy anything in us that is not of love's kind. And so that that process for some of us are like a construction site with the big bulldozers and the little sticks of dynamite and stuff like that. For a lot of us, it's like a art restoration. It's like Brad Jerzak talks about seeing a old wedding gown that was found somewhere, and the restorer working on just little bits at a time to bring it back to its original beauty,
yeah,
right? Or the art restoration that is working on these just little pieces, taking off everything that kept the original beauty from being present and seen,
yeah,
right? So that's a slow burn. There are definitely things in my life which has been the slow burn, because God will not heal us in a way that harms us more. And so God has got to work inside of our personal agency, and we resist, you know.
yeah,
If if we are so used to our prisons that we have now called home, it's hard for us to walk through an open door.
yeah. And then even just to hold space to say, what if love is a beginning, and it's a slow and fast burn. It's this burning that is, we don't need to predict how love burns through us.
Right.
We just
You
can be
can't.
open.
Right. Like
Mhm.
nobody knows the depth of their own soul or the damage that's permeated it. And we don't know if the things that we hold on to are idols or treasures, you know.
Mm,
So the work inside of that reduces us to a choice to try to control and future trip our own processes, or trust,
yeah.
or
And
trust.
then, and trust. I mean, that was the word I was going to go to. So there's this trust of love and trust, this curiosity about God. And I mean, you and I trust that God's a part of this. And then the self trust and self untrust.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of this, uh, the waves of trust washing over us as they do.
Yeah. Trust is the hardest work, because you have to stay present to trust.
Yeah,
And it's hard work. It's it's been, I look back at all the transformational journey that I've been on, trust was at the very core of it,
yeah,
over and over and over. Everybody gets salted with fire, to use the scripture. Everybody gets salted with fire. It is inevitable, whether the damage has come through others or we have created the damage ourselves. And at the center of it is this issue of trust. But you cannot trust a God who harms either you or harms anybody else. How could you?
yeah,
You can't. So at the basis of the inability to trust, there's hurt and harm and a view of God that is wrong. So what you do as a mental health professional is to help people unpack the damage so that there is a possibility that trust may occur. It's one of the great gifts of mental health um,
yeah,
profession. And a lot of people who are in the mental health profession are there because of their own journey. It dominates. In fact, there's hardly anyone that I know that just picked it out as an independent career. It was really woven into their own journeys in one sense or another.
yeah. And I
So,
think too, with what you're saying, there's like with that, as we are forging in relationships with others and we're leading with love. So psychology to me is love. One of my mentors said, you love your clients, right? And we're not supposed to say that in my field. but we love, like you love everybody. I've stepped into loving everybody and being okay with telling people I love them.
Yeah.
With there's this thing of when we hold that sacred place and we can trust more that I'm a person like everybody else, flawed at times. I can hopefully see more when I've ruptured with a client so that I can repair it whenever possible. And there's ones I'll miss, but that's also the part of the trust is that we're going to get it wrong.
Right. Right. But again, the model is one of separation, right? I cannot say this. I cannot, Scott Mitchell, who really helped me, mental health professional, when I blew up the world, he broke the rules.
Yeah.
He broke the rules. And that's why we became friends. And, the rules are made supposedly to protect everybody, but in theology, the rules that are made because they think separation is the valid model.
Yeah.
Because where's the trust? The trust is in the rules. It's not in the intuition. It's not in the empathy. It's not in the sense of union. It's not in risk, because trust always involves risk, and rules are to mitigate risk.
Yes.
So, plus it gives empowerment, and that's true in theology. It's true in any field. It empowers the rule makers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and the beliefs that the rules will protect me and govern me and give me all the things if I look right, like the man who had all the money, or all the possessions and the grains, but owed money.
Yeah.
Surely, my friends, everybody loves me. Everybody's gonna come alongside. Look at who I am. But in those moments of brokenness and weakness, that's why we have cancel culture.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really sad thing
It is
because
a really, yeah,
it's a violation of the beauty of one human being.
yeah,
One human being. Whether
yeah,
they've declared themselves to be your enemy or neighbor or family or brother or sister, So,
yeah. And so in those dark places, like you call it the Shadowlands, like in that deeper, darker place inside, the risks of who will meet me in my immutable place. Am I really lovable in this gross spot?
yeah.
When the whole world crashes down, like you're very vulnerable and honest. Well, I don't know if it's vulnerable. I think you just have integrated into yourself your crash, you're broken. And that Shadowland, you love that part of who you are. I think.
I I love the original person that was so hurt by life that it it didn't have to, and God sure didn't cause the crash. I did, but there's a lot of other things that were involved in that crash other than me. And there's no excuse. There's no justification for adultery, which is what I did, and blew up the world and harmed a lot of people. So there's no justification for it. But I do love the child that was harmed. I regret the choices, and regret when it is wrapped in love turns to a form of grief.
Yes.
And grieving is a good thing. If regret turns with fear, you get shame.
Mm-hmm.
And shame is an enemy.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we can cry over those parts of self. Like I appreciate your leadership and how you personify, that trust in supernatural love, but then self-love, and then how it allows you to live in love with other people. And as I hear you speaking, I'm like, yeah, I think that's part of it for me too. I can love the innocence that was influenced
Yeah.
and the thoughts that were put into my life, and then the thoughts that I chose to adopt that were wrong and made wrong decisions.
Yeah.
And then we can regret.
Yes. And regret also is a teacher, right?
Yes.
It's not only a sorrow or a grief, but it is a teacher.
Yeah.
And as long as it doesn't turn to shame, anything that turns to shame, it locks you into isolation and disempowers you.
And my regret is my teacher, which is what I hear you saying too. Like, my regret is my teacher. I can look back on those instances and there's parts of me that'll say, but what about that other person? Like, look what they did or that. Ooh.
No,
But
I'm with
that,
you.
but it's my
None of my
regret is
business.
for me. None of my business.
Yeah.
None of my business. Yeah. And then so there's this hard question, and I'm gonna ask you again, because in my book you write a letter to the readers and it's beautiful, but there's this hard question of like, how have you learned that you're completely loved by God? That's a really hard question. So here you go. Say it again.
How have I learned that I'm completely loved by God? I haven't,
Yeah.
right? I am continuing to learn, and I think it's going to be an eternal journey. And so the question for me would be, how have I learned that I am loved by God? Because completely loved, man, that's not that's not a place that I've come to, and I know it. But my life is so full, even in the really hard things, of the river that underlies everything, that is the kindness. You know, when I wrote The Shack and I switched it from God loves you to God is especially fond of you, I switched it from subject to object, because I love you is a subject statement, but I'm especially fond of you, Tara. See, that's an object statement. And so that's been part of my journey. That's part of learning that I am loved in a deeper and more complete way than I used to. Right? But I can still get triggered. I forget. I still eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil sometimes. And I want people to know I'm right more than I want them to know that I love them. You know. So
It's
in
so
that,
fun to be right. Like, there's still this, ooh, that felt kind of good. There's this humanness of, we like the
yeah.
win. Yeah.
Yeah, but the older you get, like me, and the more you camp inside this affection, the more the win is sour.
Mm-hmm.
The more the win. See, winning can taste good in the mouth, but bitter in the belly,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't trust it anymore. Sometimes I trust it. Sometimes, my history of, you're just a piece of crap. That history will show up in little ways, much smaller than it used to. But, like notoriety and platform, those things are crosses.
Yes.
They're not wins. They're unrighteous wealth. The win is helping somebody at the airport
Yes.
and not thinking about it as a good thing to do or a Christian thing to do or a righteous thing to do. It was just the right thing to do. It was just the
Yeah.
natural thing to do. And you can look back and go like, oh my gosh, how much have I changed?
Yes.
That's a win.
It's a huge win. And I mean, I remember, so there's so many things I've been struck by with you. In that non-transactional love.
Yeah.
And that was when I was blown away the very first time I spoke with you on Zoom. And I I don't know if I'm sure I'd had experiences of non-transactional love, but that was the first time I really was like, here's this man I'm just meeting, and there is no transactional nature. I didn't pay you, you wouldn't let me pay you. And that ministered to me in such a profound way. my heart opened to
Mm.
let some things be burnt out of me that needed to be burnt out.
Come on. Thank you, Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I'm not trying to be like God, but that is how God is. God is not a transactional God,
No.
and so God is a covenantal God, and covenant is always for the sake of the other. Transaction is always for the sake of the
Yeah.
contract maker, right? So if I make a contract, it's for me. If I treat marriage as a contract, I've got my little ways to get out of it, right? So it's not for your sake. If I'm in a marriage and we're married, it's for my sake. And that's a
Yeah.
contract. We can say covenantal words in sickness or in health and for richer, for poor. When God makes a covenant, he made it unilaterally. That's what unconditional love is.
Mm-hmm.
Conditions are contracts
Yes.
by their very nature. So, even in the covenant that God makes with Abraham, Abraham sleeps basically through the whole thing, and God does the whole covenant. And it's like, Abraham, I'm in. And it does not depend on your performance whatsoever at all. And so when we look at the New Testament and we've got all these theologies about hell and all this, they're all contracts. Our theology that is wrong is about a contractual God. So that's a good place to start. If you have a God who is contractual, that is keeping score, and can leave the covenant based on your performance, your theology is wrong. This is why 1 Corinthians says agape, God is agape, 1 John. Agape keeps no record of wrongs.
Yeah.
God keeps no record of wrongs. So what does that do to the judgment of God and to hell and to all of these theological ideas when you have a covenantal God? It screws up the whole thing. What do you do with a God who pays the ones that he hires at the beginning, and the ones that do an hour's worth of work at the end are paid the same thing? It's only our contractual mindset that says that's not fair. And it's God like, I made the covenant. This is like my money in the parable, right? This is, why are you bothered? And so, the judgment of God then becomes something that is intended or promised or completely focused on setting us free.
Well, and it's, of course, we expect judgment. And because of that, the transactional view of, if we view God as transactional, we view love as transactional. We view
Absolutely.
all of our relationships as transactional. So the
Absolutely.
idea of a marriage contract or any contract where it's like, these are the terms we've agreed to. And if you step outside of those, then I
We have
don't have to,
a section called remedies.
and I don't have to like you, or I don't have to completely love you. So that's where this I am extremely fond of you has such potency.
Yeah.
And that it's, we don't need to know that we're completely loved by God.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, let me say, we live in a contractual world. Get a contract. If you're in business,
Yeah.
unless the Holy Spirit tells you otherwise,
Yeah.
you know, that's the currency of the world. But you know what? The Holy Spirit may say, nah, you're going to get totally screwed.
Yeah. Well, I think too, it's like
That's okay.
C.S. Lewis says about pacifism and in his book, The Weight of Glory.
Glory.
And he says, you know what, you're pacifist, that's great, your neighbor's not. And I think about that with social justice and nonviolence a lot. And I'm like, that's the importance of, we need to have a boundary and a care for our own regard. We're in this broken world, this violent world where people are killing each other's children. And that's serious.
Yeah.
So love is not superficial. It's not all about Valentine's Day and we give hearts and chocolates and we woo people who are very broken and really have given up complete hope in love.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe one day I will get to the place where I will relate to everything and every person in a non-contractual way, but I'm not there yet.
No, and there's a place where we're human, we're finite. There's a place where there's some I can'ts.
Yeah, today.
Yeah, today. And it's also, love is not this like, oh, love everybody and just, it's
Yeah. No,
potent,
if you're getting
powerful.
abused, run,
Run.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, don't even consider that. The act of love can be the running,
Yeah.
not just for yourself and not just for your kids, but also for the other person,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And that's a big little statement. It sounds like something small, but there's an importance of like our sphere of influence.
Yeah.
And the act of running can be love or being us embodying the love. Okay, so I want to read a little bit from the chapter I have about you, and then if we can talk about it, because this pure of heart thing, you mentioned it already. But I just love hearing you speak about this. So I want to hear you talk about it. So bear with me, it'll maybe take 40 seconds,
Oh,
if
take
that.
it
So
on.
at one point, Paul said to me, you know, you're pure of heart, right? What obliterated my default was when I realized my pure of heartness. This comment sticks with me even now. This comment plays over and over in my mind and swims through every corner of who I am. Up until I met Paul, the potency of a pure of heart identity was lost to me. I rehearsed Paul's words in my mind for a long time. What obliterated my default was when I realized my pure of heartness. I sat with this discomfort of not knowing how to believe those words were true for me. And at the same time, I trusted Paul seemed to have something I didn't. At that moment of realization, I saw Paul accepted his flaws and loved even the worst parts of who he was. He believed somehow that his whole self was loved in a grander spiritual sense. He believed in God, he had an exhaustive knowledge of Jesus, and he had a different sense of trusting he was loved by God, flaws and all. Loved, flaws and all, and still pure of heart.
Yeah. The big deal about that was my porn addiction that I'd had since I was 12 years old. And I hated it. And there's a lot of roots for it. I don't know all of them. I know the sexual abuse as a child was part of that. I know that the abandonment stuff was part of that. Because porn is for a lot of people is a survival skill in the sense that it's a way to have a relationship without the risk of a real one. It's an imagination. And but I couldn't break it. I could not break it. And I didn't until the affair when I was 38. And I had to face everything or die, kill myself. And the last way to run away. And so it was in the change between seeing myself as fundamentally a piece of shit into, oh my gosh, I'm made in the image of God. And I'm woven in the internal world with a very presence and union with God completely, not a piece of God, but God. And yet I have personal agency and all this. So when I began to see that I was pure of heart, it absolutely violated. So the whole system, right? Because I thought I was in a war trying to overcome my piece of crap identity. And so pure of heartness, I'm like, what's that? And that's kind of what you were saying when you were reading it. It was like it violated that whole paradigm. And as soon as I started seeing pure of heart and self-controlled, it destroyed very, very quickly. It destroyed the addiction because now I had something that was actually beneath the addiction that was truer than the addiction. And so I could live. The flaws are The flaws are about the ways of my being, not the truth of my being. The truth of my being is not that I have flaws, right? It is my identity in Jesus. That's the truth of my being. The ways of my being is what I express because it's what I believe. So as a person thinks in their heart, so becomes the ways of their life. So whatever you think about the truth of who you are, guess what? You can see a person's behavior and immediately know what they believe about the truth of who they are. Right? So the pure in heartness just blew my world up. It blew the old paradigm up. And now I could, by nature, function out of the truth of who I am. So lying for me, not being a truth teller, was a survival mechanism. You know, my relationship with my dad, all this, I was trying to stay alive, and he was a violent disciplinarian, and he was a hitter. So part of what I adapted to was not truth telling. And so, you know, it didn't work all the time, but it did work some of the time. And so I began to shade the truth, and in relationships, that was a long-term one to break, where, because I happened to be quick and pretty smart and pretty creative. So all of that empowered my ability to hide inside of shading the truth. And so becoming a truth teller was transformative, where my yes is yes, my no is no. I'm a truth teller, but I am a truth teller. Not that I just tell the truth. As a result of being a truth teller, I do tell the truth. Right? So where do my flaws exist? They don't exist in my identity. They exist in all the lies that I've believed, and then the resulting ways of my being. Wholeness is when the ways of your being are an accurate expression of the truth of your being. So if you're impatient when you're driving, you either don't know that you are patient by nature, or you forgot, or you're dealing with a history where your neural pathways are set up to survive out here, not in the jungle. Well, in the jungle of modern life, where, you know, somebody cuts you off and you immediately tell them who they are in no uncertain terms and judge them tremendously, right? Because of what? Because they are interfering in your self-centered life about what you were planning to do and how quickly you were planning to do it. And so so all of that is involved. And so back behind the layer of dysfunction underneath it all is a human being made in the image and likeness of God. And here's the deal. That's true for every human being. They are in union with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, whether they know it or not. I am, whether I knew it or not. Even in the course of the day, whether I know it or not, whether I forgot or not. And over time, we grow up into the likeness of Jesus. It's this growing up that we do. And so it's like, I have been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. But the life I now live is Christ living in me. You know, and the more I'm aware of it, the more that union comes together. A lot of people know I have these friends on death row in Tennessee, a bunch of guys. I'm not there to minister to them. We're friends. And none of them want to be a killer. None of them. The deepest longings of their heart is to be good, kind, patient, long-suffering, the whole list. That's the truth. And it's there underneath everything. They want to be truth tellers. You know, and so they do. So they tell the truth about their histories and about stuff like that. And some of them are innocent. And some of them are not. And they're clear about that. So what's the deepest longing of your heart? Listen to it. That's where the still small voice is, and everybody's got one, right? So
we got to get really quiet for that. Like this is so much of what I believe, is just hearing you speak about you. And hopefully this is what my book is about. Hopefully. I think it is.
I think it is.
Yeah, is all the stuff that gets in the way, and like my negative views of others, my negative view of myself, my negative view of God, all this crap. And then deep down, the real vulnerable fears, that are associated with
Mhm.
this dark stuff, the shadow stuff we don't want to get to.
Yeah.
But if I can dig deep and say, at the heart of it all is love, and maybe God's love. I don't even think you don't have to believe it's God's love, just because Paul and I do. I mean, but it's like, what is this love thing? What is my pure? Do I have a pure of heart? I put that on my back burner for a long time. That slowly burned into me until
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I can buy into a pure of heart. I can still think I'm terrible. I can still yell at a driver. I can still lose it as a mom,
Yep.
or have somebody not like me as a boss, or whatever it is. All of those things. And at my core, I can believe that this wellspring of love that chose to participate in this creation of all of us has a really good thing deep down inside of me.
Yep. Yep. Or if you can't see it in yourself yet, and you have any children in your life,
Yeah.
what do you see? What do you see in a child?
Yeah.
Yeah, they can throw a temper tantrum and all that other stuff, but there is something that is so glorious about a child that it
Yes.
just stops you dead in your tracks.
Yeah.
And I have an atheist friend who when I asked him about what he believed in, he said, he thought about it. And he said, you know what? I believe in the way that I love my sons. And then he describes this love. Where is that coming from? From the wellspring, right? Other-centered, self-giving, co-suffering, forgiving. That's what he described. Self-sacrificial. He said, I never thought this would be true, but I would step in front of a bullet for them. No second thoughts, right? Where does that originate?
Yes.
Right? It originates in the deepest places. There's nothing deeper than that in him. He would give up his life for his kids.
Yeah.
Right? That's agape. That's love. That is what it is.
And that's not fluff. And that's like
No.
really the truth of what love is we've lost the potency.
Well, we've made it an infatuation,
Yeah.
And as soon as you do that, it's all self-centered. It's that's what happened with the adultery, right? I projected my need onto another human being, and they actually didn't matter, So the thing about infatuation is it's actually based on not knowing. And real love is always based on knowing. Real love continues to grow because the knowing grows.
Yeah.
And but infatuation, man, you get to know the person and it'll blow up your infatuation in a very short period of time. So yeah, we have, like you said, we have an impotent love, an impotent idea of love. So what are you left with? The black hole of your own need. But you then project whatever you think that need is on whoever is in front of you.
And potent love knows us.
Yep. And
that's,
potent love, yep, is
go ahead.
the gift.
Potent love is the gift that's already there.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm noticing we should wind things down here. Anything like just all of this, Paul, is an honor to hear you speak. And I love listening to you on YouTube and all these things. So I'm excited that people get to hear you talk. Anything you'd like to say before we wind things down?
I go back to a simple thing, really. And that is that every human being is indwelt by this love. It is at the core of their being, whether they know it or not. Every human being, in our language, every human being is in union with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is an eternal being. And so once you begin to see the person that is in front of you as that, rather than their actions, suddenly you have an affinity with them and a relational reality that will transcend all of their actions. So much of our lives, we live in a defensive posture, and then we judge them according to their actions. And like Paul the Apostle, I don't judge anybody according to their flesh, their behaviors and actions. You don't judge the value of a child based on their behaviors unless you're damaged to the point where you cannot see the glory of that child, right? So that changes your life, because most of our unwholesome words are about the behaviors of other people, and then we match their value according to their behaviors. Like my guys on death row, it's like one of them said to me, "It is a horrible thing to be judged for the worst day of your life." And they lock them in that cell and they can't change. So Emerson said, every human should be judged according to the best day of their life. And I like that.
I think too, what you're saying, Paul, and I'm listening, and I've landed in this place in all this conversation where when I first met you in that very first conversation, and you trusted in your own pure of heartness, and then you trusted in my pure of heartness before I knew I could.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can do for other people, is if we wrestle with our own pure of heartness and we learn to love all of who we are as individuals, then we can start to trust in the pure of heartness with other people and help them to trust their own pure of heartness.
Well, I don't even think we have to help them. All we have to do is express it.
Just express it.
Presence is everything.
Pure of heartness will help them. The
Yeah.
innate goodness, that love inside of them that's knit deep down, will do it for them. We don't have to do anything for them, just to honor who they are.
Yeah.
Or plant the seed.
Yeah. There's this verse. It's unbelievable. It says, we are the aroma of Christ to God. For those who are perishing, it's an aroma from life to life. And for those who are being saved, it's an aroma from death to death.
Beautiful.
And what's so amazing, and Paul then says, who can even begin to understand this? He's just like blown away by this very thought. And that is, for those who are living in the perishing. And it's not talking about eternal conscious torment or, eternal life or any of that stuff. He says that for anyone who is degrading, devolving, is falling deeper into their crap and losses, the presence of love is the presence, the aroma of life, life to life, right? Just by presence. For those who are being saved, that is, you've made a turn. Now you start dying to all the things that you thought were true, like you're a piece of crap. That's an aroma from death to death. So we are the aroma of Christ to God. It's an aroma from life to life, but it's an aroma from death to death. And it's what our orientation is. Are we starting to move towards health? Well, guess what? There's a lot of dying that's going to happen. Selfishness, self-centeredness, contract work, not loving the enemy, and that's a hard journey, and it's a lot of work. If you are dying, you can smell there's something different about somebody. There's just something different. And in the middle of all the losses, in the middle of all the chaos of the world, in the middle of the wars, in the middle of all this unbelievable selfishness, when you have a Mother Teresa, or you have just a neighbor who calls to see if you're okay, you can smell it. It is something different. And wouldn't it be amazing if more and more of us were the aroma of Christ to God? Just the aroma, just the presence of a smell that is life to life. It would change the cosmos. And it is changing the cosmos. I'm very much an optimist about all this.
I think that's beautifully said, in that aroma, that if we could carry the scent of Jesus, if we could carry the scent of God's love, and that is it. We don't have to do it. It's just being being this aroma.
Yep. Yep.
So that's so beautiful, Paul. And I want to land right there. Thank you so much. Thank you for, everything in just this one thing.
Tara, you are very welcome. You know, I'm especially fond of you, right?
Yeah. And I'm especially fond of you and everything you do for all of us. You're a wise, good teacher. So thank you.
Bless you. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye, Paul.
Bye-bye.